Hey everyone, welcome back to Shutter Magazine and welcome to the new year. I'm excited to talk to you about Lightroom Classic and the top 5 ways to prepare for upgrading to the latest version 9. So with new version, typically people fear new problems, right? My current version of Lightroom is working fine. Why do I need to upgrade? In this case, it is a full upgrade, so it's version 9. So like before, we had Lightroom 5, Lightroom 6, and then we went to Lightroom CC, and then Lightroom Classic, right? All these different versions, but now we are in Lightroom 9. So we're going to go through the simplest ways to prepare yourself to upgrade, right? You want to make sure to address any of the nuances with the new program, but also make sure all of your old stuff converts and imports into the new program. You shouldn't have to go out and buy new presets, profiles, things like that. So we're going to walk through all the best ways. So we're going to start out with the first tip, and that's upgrading from an older version. So if you're upgrading from Lightroom 5 or Lightroom 6, you're going to see a lot of changes, a lot of good and new features that are going to be pretty great for your upgrade. So I'm also going to go through part 2. It's going to be importing those presets. So you might have a whole bunch of LR template presets, older presets you have from Lightroom. Those are going to come into the new version 9 just fine. So I'm going to go through a few different ways to import those, the fastest ways to grab your files, bring them in, and get editing. So tip number 3 is going to be the new color processes. So instead of having color process 2010, 2012, now you have version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll cover that later. But there's also some profiles. You might be familiar with profiles like Adobe Standard might be your go-to, or if you've been using Lightroom Classic or Lightroom CC, you might be familiar with versions like Adobe Color, the newer version. So profiles now are in the basic panel. We'll cover those a little bit later and how to build custom profiles as well. Pretty awesome features. There's some other new develop module features as well that will cover things like texture, this new kind of sharpening tool that's similar to clarity but doesn't do a bunch of tonal adjustments, changes with dehaze, range masking, things like that. And then we'll go through, like I always do, getting the best performance out of Lightroom. That comes through preferences in Lightroom, catalog settings, and this new GPU acceleration tool. Is it working? Do we still need to keep it off? And going through some of those features. So let's jump into upgrading from older versions and get started there. All right, now we're ready to upgrade from an older version. So I have a catalog opened up in Lightroom CC 2015. Now you'll notice I have DNG files here because I had to convert my raw files into DNGs to even open them in this program. So for many of you that are converting your RAWs to DNGs to stay in older programs for compatibility issues, stop doing that. You're just wasting your time. It's time to upgrade. I'm going to show you how to do it. So if you're coming from that standalone version or even one from a likely if you're in a standalone version, you haven't upgraded to Classic because you bought it outright and you haven't bought into the subscription with Adobe. So you can pay $10 a month. You get Photoshop, Lightroom Classic, and some storage space on Creative Cloud. It's worth it. $10 a month for Photoshop and Lightroom Classic. I highly recommend it. The photography plan, it's simple. It's a no-brainer. They haven't changed prices on us at all. It just makes sense. So you're buying new equipment, new lenses, you got to use the most up-to-date tool. Just pay for it. Moving on, I definitely recommend updating or duplicating, your versions of Lightroom. So for Mac users, you have the ability to duplicate versions of Lightroom. So you can go in here to your application folders, and you can right-click on these different apps and you can duplicate them. So it actually makes copies. So if I want to have two versions of Lightroom open, I can do that, right? So I can double click on this and have it open up a third copy of Lightroom. Now this is Lightroom CC. I'm already failing here. um, that's Lightroom CC, so that doesn't help us. So Lightroom, if I wanted to make a duplicate real quick, which I can choose to duplicate. It's going to ask me for my password, of course. But it's a pretty quick process. Once it duplicates this application, I can actually open up 2 different catalogs at the same time, which is pretty monumental for a lot of photographers, usually working in a single catalog where everything exists. But you know, not anymore. You can work in a catalog per session per shoot and open up multiple catalogs. You can actually do as many of these duplicates as you want. I recommend only going up to 4, but you can absolutely duplicate your Lightroom application and open up multiple versions. So I can do a just do another default catalog. Let's see here. We'll choose a different one. We'll create a new catalog and we'll just call it, oh, I don't know, Lightroom CC old. But if you already have a catalog you could open up, of course you don't have to create a new one. But this is how you can have a completely different catalog opened up. As you can see here, my ARW Sony RAW files won't open up. Only the DNG files will. Go ahead and import those. And those files are going to come directly into Lightroom. Now, if I toggle between my original version in here, you can see that they're bringing those files in. So I can have 2 catalogs open at once. I have 3 open right now, right? I have Lightroom Classic open as well. All the same session. Obviously, I wouldn't do this for the same session. It'd be 3 different sessions if I was working in multiple catalogs, but you can absolutely do it, and that's how. So the reason why I recommend doing that is because when you upgrade to version 9 or 9.1, which they have out now, it's going to overwrite your previous versions of Lightroom Classic, right? So there's an 8.41 version of Lightroom Classic. There's 6.0. There's all these other versions of Lightroom Classic. Well, if you don't want to upgrade your old catalogs or you want to have some sort of a backup, I highly recommend before you upgrade or update your Lightroom, you come in here to Lightroom Classic and you can right click on Lightroom Classic. Right now I'm on version, mine's version 9.0, but yours would say 8.4.1 or 8.3, maybe whatever version you have if you haven't upgraded to 9. You can right click on it and choose duplicate. And then what I did is I renamed it. So I can actually have Lightroom Classic 8.41 duplicated here. So if I want to open up that version, not a problem. I can do that. And it's going to open up another version of Lightroom. So, I mean, you can get pretty, pretty specific on how many versions you want. I have multiple versions of Classic 9 and Classic 8. So, as you can see here, a bunch of catalogs, they all open up. Of course, the more catalogs you have opened up, the more you're exposing yourself for corruption, things like that. I am not going to guarantee that's not going to happen if you have, 10 catalogs open and something's going to corrupt and close. So just be mindful of that. It's a workflow tip, but it's not something necessarily I would, do all the time. So once you create those duplicates, then you can go in and you can certainly upgrade your program, and then you can start to update your. You can actually upgrade your catalogs as well. So that's part 2. So now that I have these catalogs done, what it's going to have me do in Lightroom, for me to open that up in, say, a newer version of Lightroom, like Lightroom Classic, it's going to ask for me to upgrade this catalog. So when it does that, that's nothing to worry about. If you do have smart previews or standard previews, they're going to upgrade to the newer version, but you're going to lose them for the older one, just to be mindful of that. But when I do upgrade, it's going to create a duplicate of my catalog, and it's just going to add a -2 behind it, so -2 is the upgraded catalog here, and the original one will still open up here, and it'll open up in Lightroom. We'll open it up in just straight up Adobe Lightroom. We'll click relaunch. So you can still have your older version where I would need an older, if something didn't transfer or your presets aren't working or for whatever reason something isn't, fully transferring over, then you have the older version. Of course, that's not an issue. But yeah, we have Lightroom Classic, our old -2 catalog opened up, and we also have the original one. So that's the quick way to upgrade from an older version. Now let's jump into importing presets, the fun stuff. All right, so now we can look into importing presets and what's involved with that. So in the develop module on the left-hand side, and in your older version, likely your standalone version of Lightroom, you're going to have your presets listed here. And to access those, you can right-click on any one of them and choose Show in Finder. Now, it's likely that these presets are still going to be saved in the .lr template because this is the old format. So for the newer version of Lightroom, they're going to need to be converted to XMP files. And what I like about that is it's not confusing anymore to know what's an XMP. It's pretty universal file now. So much like for your sidecar files for your raw images to save out your adjustments, now your presets are going to be the same. And the big difference between where they're being saved is instead of in Lightroom and develop presets, they're now being saved in Camera Raw and settings. This is actually where your custom profiles as well as your presets will be saved for all of your adjustments, all of your presets, excuse me. So once we pull these in here, you can see right here these XMPs have been converted. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to copy and paste all of those develop presets. We can actually just copy them and just back them up to like our documents folder. I like to put them in my Adobe. We can put them in Lightroom presets, but it's a good way to back those up. Now, if you have noticed with Lightroom, if you import from your home folder where those are stored, it will remove them. So you definitely don't want to do that, which is why I back them up here. But it's also a good idea to back up your presets in case your computer crashes and have them saved somewhere. So the way that I did that, again, right click, show in Finder. You want to make sure to have them in two places. They're still here in my develops folder, as well as they are in this documents folder. Now, the old school way of importing presets was to drag and drop it into the actual dock or where the app is opened up, so that way you can install the preset. Now in Lightroom Classic, let me pull up my original catalog here. You have the ability to import them in the develop module. So you can't import .lr template files, which I'll show you in just a moment. Let's go back here. Spinning wheel of death, always fun. Sometimes whenever you're clicking around in Lightroom, when it's starting up initially, it runs a little bit slower up front. So you are seeing that firsthand, it running just a little more sluggish. Let's see here. Not sure what happened with my crop, but it seems like my entire image got cropped out. Not sure why. Let's leave it like that. So here is how we can import presets. So we're going to go up to Develop Module, File, Import Develop Profiles and Presets. So in order to find those specific presets we saved, right, all of them are going to be grayed out because you can't import LR templates. So our next solution would be to take one of these and drag and drop them down into the dock, so that way we get the prompt for install templates. You might be familiar with this process. We click install. Now the real question is, does it show up right away? Let's see what that preset was we were installing. 1B Portra, we'll install this one. Let's see if this opens up. Usually it gives you a conversion. that it brought it in, but I'm not seeing that. So what it might require you to do is to close out of the catalog altogether. Reopen up our So here's an issue you might run into where you have multiple versions. You have to make sure you're opening it up in the correct version. So different error you're going to get, but a realistic one. Catalog's too new to be opened up in an older version of Lightroom. So upgrade, too new. Those are pretty standard prompts. But you should get a pop-up here once it actually converts your preset that says that it converted it to an XMP. That usually happens right after you relaunch your catalog. The fact that it's not popping up right away seems a little odd. I don't see it listed at the bottom here either. So it might just be taking its sweet time. But installing that preset, we can double check to make sure it's not saved in our library folder. So we can go through all of these. Down to camera raw. I already forgot where I'm supposed to go. My presets. Doesn't look like it installed it just yet. So this is kind of the old-fashioned way to do it, and one that doesn't always work right away. So I like to go to a different alternative, and I like to copy and paste the files directly into the folder here. So if I want my presets to automatically install, I can take them from my user presets folder, copy this, and just paste them. Now my user presets are, let's see here, let's undo that. Let's name this something else. Custom 2, because that will likely be what the preset group name is as well. So now we can go in and we will relaunch Lightroom Classic. And hopefully it'll give us the converted files option that we're looking for. So I have my presets, these user presets. It looks like it removed the one. Don't think it's going to give me the option to import this way, but we'll see. No, imported them that way much faster. So put them all into my user presets, which is great. So they're all saved there now. So you do have your third option, which is just import presets directly there. Now it should have converted them automatically. User presets, yep, automatically converted those to XMPs. So you just want to kind of be careful. I think I replaced all of my original presets, so I don't know if any of these ones that I had before are available now. Like my preset, if it's still here in Finder, it looks like it's there, and it will like populate once I right click on something. So you just want to be mindful of that. Let's see, any one of these here. So those are slowly, yeah, buried somewhere in there. So be mindful of that. But yeah, there's your other option to just bring them in directly into the import. That worked better than import develop profiles from there. So yeah, those are the quickest ways to bring your presets in. I always recommend doing the Lightroom method, especially if you have a large group. it's typically easier to kind of bring them in and they'll get converted. You just have to relaunch Lightroom, but you can save them in your settings folder from the original Lightroom folder wherever your developed presets are saved. But that's multiple ways to do importing presets, but it shouldn't be that complicated. Sometimes you got to relaunch Lightroom and things like that. And so let's move into the color process and profiles change. All right, so you'll notice in the Lightroom Classic application, so that's in version 8 and version 9, that your panels are kind of switched up here. So at the very top of the basic panel, you'll notice you have treatment and then profile, where typically Adobe Standard or Adobe Color now for Adobe Classic, Lightroom Classic will automatically default, but you'll notice that your color profile is at the very top. So it's no longer buried in the calibration panel down here below. So you have color process, which also changed from the 2012 version that you're used to seeing, and now you have version 5, version 1 through 5. So version 1 you might be familiar with is very similar to 2010. So if you're still wanting to work with that 2010 color process, I'm not sure why. I know some people still do. You have the ability to go back to that. But any of the versions after that are the 2012 process. The version 2 and 3, I think, are 2012. And then all the latest versions allow you to access things like range masking, which are really useful for Lightroom. So those are the kind of big changes with the color process and color profiles, but they're two really big ones to consider. So just make sure to keep in mind you still have the ability to change profile, but what I like is to show the abilities that you have to do, changing the profile. You have custom profiles um, that you can do, and so custom profiles are built from Adobe Camera Raw. I've covered that in a previous article, converting LUTs to color profiles, but it's a way to save like actions and adjustments to your images in Photoshop as color profiles. So what you basically have for a color profile is a non-destructive version to sort of take your image from here and not adjust our sliders. So if I want my images to have this kind of like warmer kind of tone here, you noticed that none of my sliders here changed. Nothing in tone curve changed in order to achieve that. It's all tied to this color profile here. And so I can turn the amount down if I want to kind of show a before and after here of the specific profile. But any of your third-party profiles that you might purchase, like the one click or the options, your different, these are all custom profiles that I built, but you also have a bunch of them, like the develop presets, your Visco presets, all those kind of things that you can use in here, different profiles. Those are all available for you to use, and it's actually pretty cool that you can preview what they're going to look like with the profile browser. So the custom profiles are the only ones that give you the option to change your amount. So I can amplify this and take it up even further if I wanted to. I wouldn't want to in this case, but you have that ability to kind of amplify the amount, which is pretty awesome. So um, as far as new features in Lightroom, that's definitely one of them that gives you that kind of ability to push your creativity but also be non-destructive. So let's look at some other key develop features that are available for you as well in the develop panel. All right, so let's look at some key develop module features that they added with the Lightroom Classic application. In the basic panel, you'll notice that your presence sliders have increased quite a bit. So you have a new tool, this texture slider, and the texture slider is a little bit different than clarity. As you'll notice when I apply it here, it sharpens the images, or sharpens the image, but it doesn't really affect the tonal quality as much. So if you see the difference between there and what clarity does, clarity really darkens those the circles around the eyes. Texture does a really nice way of basically just sharpening and bringing more detail out in the image without darkening and bringing that tonal shift. So I really like it for just a slight skin smoothing. It works really well in comparison to clarity, which starts to just look kind of fake overall. Not one that I typically like to use, but it's definitely a good tool. Texture was an awesome add for for Lightroom Classic. Now you also have dehaze, which is a great tool for contrast or an alternative contrast. One thing you want to be careful with is it really makes the skin kind of orange once you go too heavy, but it's a pretty awesome tool to add some more kind of drama to the image versus contrast, right? So contrast really shifts the colors quite a bit. Dehaze does this kind of mid-tones to dark tones kind of a shift rather than contrast as a whole, affecting the whites to the black point altogether. So moving into the range masking, which is a pretty awesome tool. You now have range masking ability in version 5 and version 4 to come in and adjust specific parts of the image. So if I wanted to do a quick teeth whitening, right, I can come in here to range mask and turn it into color, and I could pick just the teeth to do some teeth whitening. Now that's going to show my range here. Well, if I turn range mask to luminance, which might show for a better option here. Keep highlights full, bringing the dark tones down where only the teeth are affected. Now you can see that this effect only brightening the teeth. Now that was a quick adjustment, of course, with the same way I would go here, just to whiten the teeth. Now it's going to cover the lip as well. So you just got to kind of be careful where that's going, but now you have those adjustments going to just the teeth. And what's really great is it's a better tool than Auto Mask, of course. It just does a really good job if you want to fix a specific area of the image, and especially like if I wanted to change the color of shirt here, it definitely becomes an opportunity to come in here just into the green shirt. Right? So if I wanted to come in and choose color, pick the shirt, only the shirt's going to be selected. So in certain situations, of course, like the red brick in the background or the sky or something like that, that I wanted to, um, affect, I could definitely do that. Auto mask does a pretty good job, but this cleans up the image pretty good, and I can drop the amount down to really kind of zone in on the shirt. And if I wanted to change the color of the shirt, I could do that. So that's desaturating it. I don't want to brighten it, but I can warm the shirt up. Take, for instance, if I wanted to, different colors. Um, this isn't working as as perfectly great in changing the color and things like that, but you would have the ability to do that. I'd have to add some additional to fix some of the areas in the shirt there, but you kind of get the idea. of where we could take something like this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit reset on that. But range masking is definitely a cool tool to use as well. I really like to use it when I'm doing a graduated filter, and if I wanted to use this and warm up the right side, which I thought was a little bit cooler, I can do that. And just like quickly brighten it from there to there just to kind of even it out. And if I wanted to do range masking of luminance, I could figure out how I could get rid of the kids from being applied. Bringing the amount slider over to the right, and now I can kind of see that subtle shift there, and it just hitting the right hand side. So there's definitely some cool features with range masking and things like that. And so another really big one, I already talked about that, is the custom profiles. Kind of already went through that. Those options become really awesome for you to customize the kind of style that you want to apply to an image after you've kind of done the editing already. You have a few different options here that are non-destructive, which I think are pretty great. So let's move into increasing your performance with preferences, as well as talking about the GPU acceleration that's added in Lightroom Classic version 9. All right, so Lightroom preferences are a very important part of my workflow in checking when things are running slow. Like for instance, you notice how slow my previews here are taking to load, which tells me that my catalog settings are running quite slow. My catalog settings aren't set right. So if I go in here and I set this to 1024 and low, my previews should be changing a lot faster. And if I really want to accelerate this, I can go down to previews and choose standard previews here. And those should be building a lot faster than they were across the board. So whenever those are taking a while to load and I'm waiting on that, that's the first thing I check, is to make sure that those are set to low, because it's going to build a standard preview every time you make a change. So you want to make sure that that's set correctly. Moving into preferences, it becomes really important that you have all of your settings here correct. So I'll get to graphics processor in just a minute, but in general, I turn the splash screen to turn off. I set that off there. File handling, that's pretty straightforward. For performance, I'm jumping down to cache settings 100 as usual. Smart previews, use those instead of the originals for image editing. Now my images are running a little bit slower because it's not recognizing or it is recognizing the smart previews, but it should be, definitely should be running faster than this, which is kind of odd. Well, I say that and then it runs super fast. So all those kind of changes should run quite a bit faster um, with your Lightroom preferences. So I always make sure to have the Use Smart Previews turned on. You can always optimize your catalog, go to catalog settings there as well. So all those things are going to be certainly helpful, and something I always look at if the catalog's running slow. So GPU acceleration, it's something I haven't really noticed too much of a performance upgrade on, but it's definitely worth jumping into if we want to test to make sure it's is it giving us some a little bit better performance with using a brush or something like that. Jumping into that, let's see if it's giving us a little more performance upgrade. So if we're running into, kind of zooming in here, and we want to see if it's going to fix, help with some skin work, that would be the first thing that I'd want to check. So looking at this image, we'll go into the develop module. If I want to do some skin smoothing here, I can drop, let's see, turn this to auto, hit my K key, and we'll do some skin softening too, which is my texture. Turn on the that. Now I don't have auto mask on, so let's do it with. Didn't do a very good job, did it? So I can turn on skin softening light. Auto mask is turned on for erase. That will be fine. We can turn the green skin off. So as far as it applying and looking decent, it's all about how smooth it applies it on the background here. So as you can see, it's kind of, it applies and then runs a little bit slower. With the preference turned to off, seems to be new. Doesn't seem to be, oh, okay, that was a little heavy. Doesn't seem to be giving me a whole lot of performance differences between having it turned on and off. And that's where I was really trying to find the biggest gain with that. Turning it on for custom. Seems to be pretty smooth. Not bad. It's getting kind of crazy with the adjustments here. So um, one thing we'd want to check is how differences between off and custom. Definitely a little bit slower. I don't want to use teeth whitening. We'll use dodge with a little bit of shadows. Let's see here. A little delayed. Turning it on to custom. A little bit faster. So there you have it. I mean, the custom is a little bit better for the brush work, and especially in the local adjustments. So definitely something worth exploring. I mean, I'm on a MacBook Pro 2016, so no crazy GPU in this thing. So pretty subtle shift with it on custom. So nothing really to rant and rave about. So let's jump into the results. All right, so there you have it. Now that you're fully equipped, it's time to upgrade. There's no reason to hesitate. So any of you out there that are still bad-mouthing Adobe, you're in the standalone version, you're converting your DNGs, if this hasn't convinced you, then continue doing what you're doing. You're wasting your time, but to teach their own. You do your thing. Preparing for those nuances makes it easier for the transition. So, coming from Lightroom 5 or Lightroom 6, there's a lot of stuff for you to, a lot of features for you to look forward to. So I definitely recommend, now that things are slowing down, we're going into off season, right? For many of us wedding photographers, it's a perfect time to reset, upgrade your OS. I recently did the Catalina, so far so good, as well as upgrading to Lightroom Classic version 9. Things are good there. Other than that, I mean, using my different import options for bringing your presets in, that's probably going to be one of the bigger concerns or questions that you're going to have, is bringing those new presets in. So if you have a bunch of older ones, there's 3 different ways to do it. Drag and drop into the dock like we had shown. There's the using the Finder or your library folders to find your files, copying and pasting them, as well as just importing them in the presets module in the develop panel. Is your final option, which worked for us pretty good. So definitely we use what works, but those are the different options to bring those presets in. But with all those features, with all the new, all the new things that are added, I still recommend leaving the GPU settings off. If you have different results leaving it on or leaving it on custom, definitely let me know. But it's one of those things that I'm going to keep it off for myself for now. So tune in next month, as there's going to be more post-production topics. And yeah, thanks for tuning in.